Welcome to a heartwarming tale of unexpected love and new beginnings. When Eduarda Santos arrives in the small town of Valle Verde, pregnant and alone, she finds kindness from a stranger named Augusto who offers her shelter on his farm. Their connection grows as they face challenges together, proving that sometimes life's greatest blessings come when we least expect them. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The bus came to a stop at the small station in Valle Verde, a town so tiny it barely appeared on maps. Eduarda Santos gripped her small backpack tightly as she stepped down from the bus, her other hand instinctively moving to her slightly swollen belly. 4 months pregnant, and her whole life had fallen apart. "Last stop, miss," the driver said. Handing her the small suitcase she'd stored underneath, Eduarda nodded her thanks, too exhausted to speak. The long journey from the city had drained what little energy she had left. She looked around at the dusty station, just a wooden bench under a metal roof, a vending machine that looked like it hadn't worked in years, and miles of farmland stretching out in every direction. She sat down heavily on the wooden bench, fighting back tears. How had everything gone so wrong? 2 months ago, she'd been happily working as an accounting assistant, living in a nice apartment and dating Roberto Mendez, a rising star at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Their relationship had been going so well, or so she'd thought. "You're what?" Roberto had said when she'd told him about the baby, his handsome face transforming from confusion to anger in seconds. "This is impossible. We were careful." "I know, but it happened," Eduarda had replied, her hand trembling. "I took 3 tests. Roberto had paced around his expensive downtown apartment, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair. "Do you have any idea what this would do to my career? To my family's reputation? My father is expecting me to make partner next year." "But I thought we loved each other," she'd stammered. His laugh had been cruel. "Love? Eduarda, we've been dating for 8 months. This was fun, but I'm not ready for a family. My life is just beginning." "So is this baby's," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. Roberto's eyes had hardened. "This isn't my problem. It's your mistake." "My mistake? You must have forgotten to take your pill or something," he'd accused. "I can't destroy my future." "Because of your carelessness." And just like that, it was over. The next day, she'd been called into her boss's office. Roberto's father owned the company where she worked, and suddenly her position was no longer necessary. With no job, she couldn't afford her apartment. When she tried to find another place to rent, landlords would look at her growing belly and suddenly remember the apartment had just been taken. A fly buzzed around Eduarda's face, bringing her back to the present. She shooed it away and wiped a tear from her cheek. Valle Verde was the last place she'd expected to end up, but her college roommate had once mentioned it was where her grandmother grew up. "The kind of place where time stands still," she'd said. Exactly what Eduarda needed. A place where no one knew her, where she could figure out what to do next. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Eduarda reached for her water bottle, only to find it empty. Great. Pregnant, alone, jobless, and now dehydrated in a town that seemed to have exactly 1 bench and nothing else. She felt a fresh wave of tears threatening. "Excuse me, would you like some water?" Eduarda looked up to see a tall man standing before her, holding out a bottle of water. He wore a simple plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with kind brown eyes and a bit of stubble on his jaw. "Thank you," she said, accepting the bottle gratefully. "I'm Augusto Pereira," he said. "Are you waiting for someone?" Eduarda took a long drink before answering. "No, I just arrived. She hesitated. "I'm looking for a place to stay, actually, and maybe work." Augusto studied her for a moment, and she felt herself tense, waiting for his eyes to drift to her belly, for his expression to change to judgment or pity. But his gaze remained steady and warm. "Valle Verde doesn't get many visitors," he said. "The hotel closed down last year. There's a boarding house, but Mrs. Oliveira is visiting her sister in the capital this month." "Oh," Eduarda said, her heart sinking. "Is there a bus back to the city today?" Augusto shook his head. Not until Thursday, that's 3 days from now. Eduarda bit her lip, trying not to panic. She didn't have enough money for 3 days in a hotel, even if there had been one. I have. A guest room, Augusto said simply. At my farm. It's not fancy, but it's clean and comfortable. You're welcome to stay until you figure things out. Eduarda stared at him. You don't even know me, he shrugged. I'm a good judge of character, and you look like you could use a break. His eyes finally moved to her belly, but there was no judgment in his gaze. My truck is over there if you'd like a ride. If not, I understand. Eduarda hesitated. Getting into a car with a stranger in a town where no one knew her was exactly the kind of thing her mother had always warned her against. But something in his eyes made her trust him. And what choice did she have? Thank you, she said finally. That's very kind. The drive to Augusto's farm took about 20 minutes, along dusty roads flanked by fields of corn and soybeans. Eduarda watched the landscape pass by, feeling strangely calm for the first time in weeks. So what brings you to Valeverde? Augusto asked. We're not exactly a tourist destination. I needed somewhere quiet, she said. Somewhere to think. He nodded, not pushing for more. After a moment, she felt compelled to explain herself. I'm pregnant, she said, though it was obvious. The father. He didn't want anything to do with us. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling ashamed. He said it was my mistake. Augusto's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Some men don't deserve the title of father, he said, quietly. They rode in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. My father was like that, he said, always talking about mistakes and disappointments, never about joy or possibility. Is he still... Eduarda began. He died 3 years ago, Augusto said. Left me the farm. My grandfather built it and my father nearly ran it into the ground. I've been working to bring it back ever since. Augusto turned onto a long driveway, lined with tall trees. At the end stood a large 2-story farmhouse, painted white with green shutters. It wasn't fancy, as he'd said, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Here we are, he said, parking in front of the house. Home sweet home. As he helped her out of the truck, Eduarda felt a flutter of movement in her belly, the baby moving. For the first time, she gasped, pressing her hand against the spot. Are you okay? Augusto asked, concerned. Yes, she said, a small smile forming on her lips despite everything. I think the baby likes your farm. Augusto smiled back, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Smart kid, he said. He grabbed her suitcase from the truck bed and led her toward the house. Come on, I'll show you to your room. The inside of the farmhouse was clean and homey, with wooden floors and simple, comfortable furniture. The guest room was on the first floor, with a large window overlooking an orchard of orange trees. Bathroom's right next door, Augusto said, setting down her suitcase. Kitchen's down the hall. Feel free to help yourself to anything. I usually eat dinner around 7, but no pressure to join me. Thank you, Eduarda said, overwhelmed by his kindness. I don't know how to repay you. No need, he said. Everyone needs help sometimes. He left her to settle in, and Eduarda sat down on the edge of the bed, running her hand across the clean, crisp quilt. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel judged or unwanted. She walked to the window and looked out at the orchard, where the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves. Her hand moved to her belly again, feeling that tiny flutter of life. You don't need to worry, she whispered to her baby. We'll figure this out. Later that evening, she joined Augusto in the kitchen. He was making a simple meal of grilled chicken, rice, and vegetables. Can I help? She asked. Sure, he said. You can chop those tomatoes if you want. They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I was thinking, Eduarda said finally. I noticed your bookshelf in the living room is full of ledgers. Are those for the farm? Augusto nodded. Accounting was never my strong suit. My father always said I was better with my hands than my head. I'm an accountant, Eduarda said. Or I was. I could help you organize your books as a way to pay for my stay. Augusto looked at her with surprise. You don't need to do that. I want to, she insisted. I need to feel useful. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but only if you're feeling up to it. Your main job right now is taking care of yourself and that baby. She smiled. grateful for his understanding. "You're very kind, Augusto. Most people haven't been so accepting." He turned back to the stove, flipping the chicken. "People can be cruel when they don't understand something, or when they're afraid." "What would they be afraid of?" she asked. "That they could end up in the same situation," he said simply. "That life doesn't always go according to plan." They ate dinner together on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. Augusto told her about the farm, the crops he grew, the improvements he was making, his plans for the future. He spoke with passion, and Eduarda found herself relaxing in his company. "What about you?" he asked finally. "What are your plans?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything happened so fast. One day I had a job, an apartment, a boyfriend. The next day it was all gone. Because of the baby." She nodded, blinking back tears. "Roberto, that's the father. He said I was ruining his future, that it was a mistake to deal with." She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't usually cry in front of strangers." "We're not strangers anymore," Augusto said gently. "We're neighbors, temporary neighbors." Eduarda smiled despite her tears. "Neighbors. I like that. And for what it's worth," he added, "what you're carrying isn't a mistake or something to be ashamed of." He nodded toward her belly. "It's life. Pure and simple." "You don't think I'm irresponsible?" she asked, her voice small. "I think you're brave," he said. "Brave and strong. And you're not alone, Eduarda. Not anymore." His words washed over her like a healing balm. For the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, Eduarda felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The next morning, Eduarda woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds singing outside her window. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the bus ride, the kind stranger, the farm. She dressed quickly and found her way to the kitchen. Augusto was already up, wearing work clothes and boots, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "Is that coffee I smell?" "It is, but—" He looked at her belly. "Can you have coffee?" "1 cup a day is fine," she said. "The doctor said so." He nodded and poured her a mug. "There's also orange juice, fresh from the orchard, and I made eggs and toast." As they ate breakfast, Augusto explained his plan for the day. "I need to check on the cornfields and repair some fencing. Will you be okay here by yourself?" "Of course," Eduarda said. "Actually, if it's all right with you, I'd like to look at those ledgers we talked about." "Be my guest," he said. "They're a mess, though, I warned you." After Augusto left, Eduarda settled herself at the dining room table with the farm's ledgers. She was shocked at what she found. The farm was making money. Quite a lot, actually. But the accounting was so disorganized that Augusto probably had no idea how profitable his business really was. She spent the morning creating a new system, organizing receipts, and making notes about potential tax deductions Augusto had missed. The work felt good, familiar and satisfying. Around noon, she heard a vehicle approaching. Looking out the window, she saw an expensive-looking SUV pulling up to the house. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, and gorgeous, wearing clothes that looked like they belonged in a fashion magazine, not a farm in Valle Verde. The woman knocked on the door and Eduarda hesitated before answering it. "Hello," the woman said, her perfect eyebrows rising in surprise. "Who are you?" "I'm Eduarda. I'm staying here for a few days." The woman's eyes narrowed, then dropped to Eduarda's belly. Her expression changed to one of understanding, the wrong kind of understanding. "I see," she said coldly. "Is Augusto home?" "No, he's out in the fields." The woman sighed dramatically. "Of course he is, always working." She thrust out a manicured hand. "I'm Camila Ferreira, Augusto's fiancée." Eduarda felt her stomach drop. "Fiancée?" Augusto hadn't mentioned being engaged. "Nice to meet you," she managed to say. "I'll wait for him inside," Camilla said, pushing past Eduarda into the house. She looked around with a critical eye. "Did he tell you we're getting married in the spring?" My father owns the biggest agricultural supply company in the region. The merger of our families will make Augusto one of the most powerful men in Valle Verde. She smiled thinly. Once I convince him to modernize this place, of course. Eduarda didn't know what to say. Augusto had seemed so kind, so genuine. How could he not have mentioned a fiancé? Oh, are these the farm ledgers? Camilla asked, peering at the table where Eduarda had been working. Why are you looking at those? I'm an accountant, Eduarda explained. I was helping organize them. Camilla laughed, a high, tinkling sound with no warmth in it. How charitable of you. But I've already arranged for my father's accountants to handle all that after the wedding. Augusto doesn't need to worry his handsome head about numbers. Before Eduarda could respond, they heard the sound of a truck pulling up. A moment later, Augusto walked in, looking surprised to see Camilla. Camilla, what are you doing here? Surprising my future husband, of course, she said, walking over to kiss him on the cheek. And I see you've been busy in my absence, making new friends. Augusto's eyes moved from Camilla to Eduarda, who stood frozen by the dining table, her hand protectively over her belly. Eduarda is staying in the guest room for a few days, he explained. She's new in town. So I gathered, Camilla said, her voice dripping with implication. Well, now that I'm here, why don't you go clean up? I thought we could have lunch in town. There's so much wedding planning to discuss. Augusto hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Actually, I have a lot of work to do today. The fence in the north pasture can wait, Camilla interrupted. Honestly, Augusto, sometimes I think you care more about this farm than about our future. A tense silence fell over the room. Eduarda felt like she was intruding on a private moment. I should go to my room, she said quietly, gathering up her accounting notes. No, stay, Augusto said quickly. You don't need to leave. Yes, stay, Camilla echoed, though her eyes said the opposite. After all, I'd love to hear how you two met. It's not every day Augusto brings home a friend. The way she said friend made Eduarda's cheeks burn. She knew exactly what Camilla was implying. We met at the bus station yesterday, Augusto said, his voice firm. Eduarda needed a place to stay and all the rooms in town were taken. How convenient, Camilla said. She turned to Eduarda with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And the father of your baby? Where is he in this touching story? Camilla, Augusto said sharply. That's enough. But Eduarda straightened her shoulders, meeting Camilla's gaze directly. He decided he didn't want to be a father. Said it would ruin his future. Camilla's expression softened slightly, a flash of genuine sympathy crossing her face before the cold mask returned. Men can be such disappointments, can't they? She turned back to Augusto. Speaking of disappointments, are you coming to lunch or not? Augusto looked torn. Give me 15 minutes to clean up, he said finally. As soon as he left the room, Camilla turned to Eduarda, her voice low and threatening. Listen carefully. I don't know what game you're playing, but Augusto is mine. He's too kind for his own. Good. Always taking in strays and lost causes. But don't mistake kindness for interest. She smiled coldly. Enjoy your little vacation here, but remember, when I'm mistress of this house, things will be very different. Before Eduarda could respond, Augusto returned, freshly changed. Ready? He said, though he didn't look happy about it. Perfect, Camilla purred, taking his arm possessively. Don't wait dinner for us, Eduarda. These wedding discussions can go on for hours. As they left, Augusto glanced back at Eduarda with an apologetic look. Then the door closed and she was alone. Eduarda sank into a chair, feeling sick to her stomach. Of course Augusto was engaged. Men like him, kind, handsome, successful, didn't stay single. And of course his fiancée was beautiful, wealthy and perfect. She pressed her hands against her face, trying not to cry. She'd been a fool to think she'd found safety here. This wasn't her home, and Augusto wasn't her anything. He was just a kind stranger who'd offered temporary shelter to a woman in need. Tomorrow, she decided, she would leave. She didn't know where she'd go, but she couldn't stay here, causing problems between Augusto and his future wife. She'd find another small town somewhere she could start fresh, somewhere she truly belonged. But as she looked around at the warm, welcoming farmhouse, she couldn't help but wish that place could have been here. Eduarda spent the afternoon packing her few belongings. There was no point in staying where she wasn't wanted. Camilla's words kept echoing in her mind. Augusto is mine. Of course he was. A man like Augusto, kind, stable, with his own farm, wouldn't be interested in a pregnant, jobless woman with nothing to offer. She had just zipped up her small suitcase when she heard Augusto's truck returning. Glancing at the clock, she was surprised to see it was only 4 in the afternoon. Hadn't Camilla said their lunch would take hours? Footsteps approached her door, followed by a gentle knock. "Eduarda, can we talk?" She opened the door to find Augusto standing there, looking troubled. His eyes immediately went to her packed suitcase. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I think it's best," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your fiancé made it clear I'm not welcome here." Augusto ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "Camila shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. It's your house, your life. I'm just passing through." "That's not—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Camilla and I aren't engaged. Not officially." Eduarda raised an eyebrow. "She seems to think you are." "Her father and my father arranged things years ago, a merger of our families and businesses. It's what they wanted, not what I chose." He looked down at his hands. "I've been trying to find a way to end it, but her father is my biggest supplier. If I break things off with Camila, you could lose your farm," Eduarda finished for him. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "But that doesn't mean you have to leave. Please, stay, at least until you figure out your next step." Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. There was sincerity there, and something more, something that made her want to believe him. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Absolutely," he said firmly. "This is my house, and I decide who stays here." Slowly she nodded. "Okay, I'll stay a little longer." Relief washed over his face. "Good. That's good." He smiled, and Eduarda couldn't help smiling back. "Now, how about dinner?" "I stopped at Maria's market and got fresh vegetables for a stew." They cooked together that evening, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchrony. Augusto told her about his childhood on the farm, about his stern grandfather who built the place from nothing, and about his father who cared more about social status than farming. "My father wanted to be important," he explained as he chopped carrots. "He thought marrying me off to Camilla would finally give him the respect he craved. When he died, her father, Sebastian Ferreira, made it clear he expected our arrangement to continue." "And what do you want?" Eduarda asked softly. Augusto's hands stilled. "I want peace. A simple life. Someone to share it with who loves this land as much as I do." His eyes met hers. Someone real. The moment lingered between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then the timer on the stove buzzed, breaking the spell. After dinner, they sat on the back porch again, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "Tomorrow," Augusto said, "I need to check the southern fields. Would you like to come? I could show you the whole farm." "I'd like that," Eduarda said, surprised by how much she meant it. That night, lying in bed, she placed her hands on her growing belly. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Should we trust him?" As if in answer, she felt that gentle flutter again, stronger this time, a tiny foot or hand pushing against her palm. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, Eduarda felt a surge of pure joy. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. After breakfast, Augusto led Eduarda to his truck for their tour of the farm. He drove slowly along dirt roads that wound through fields of corn, soybeans, and wheat. He spoke with passion about his crops, about the organic methods he was introducing, and about his plans for the future. "My father thought bigger was always better," he explained. "He wanted to compete with the industrial farms. But I believe in quality over quantity, growing food that's good for people and good for the earth." "That's admirable," Eduarda said, genuinely impressed. "It must be hard to go against what your father wanted." "It was his farm, but now it's mine," Augusto said simply. "We all have, so to find our own way." He stopped the truck at the top of a gentle hill. From there they could see the entire property, the fields, the orchard, the farmhouse in the distance. "It's beautiful," Eduarda said, taking in the view. "This is my favorite spot," Augusto admitted. Whenever I need to think, I come here. They got out of the truck and sat on a fallen log. A warm breeze rustled the tall grass around them. What about you? Augusto asked. Tell me about your life before all this. Eduarda took a deep breath. There's not much to tell. I grew up in the city. My parents died in a car accident when I was 18. I put myself through college studying accounting. Got a job at a good firm. Met Roberto, the baby's father, at a work function. He was charming, successful. She sighed. I thought we had a future together. His loss, Augusto said quietly. What? I said it's his loss, Augusto repeated, his eyes meeting hers. A man who would walk away from his child, from you, he's a fool. Eduarda felt tears welling up. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you're strong, smart, brave enough to start over somewhere new, and I know that baby is lucky to have you as a mother. A tear slipped down her cheek. Thank you, she whispered. Augusto reached out hesitantly, as if asking permission, then gently wiped the tear away with his thumb. The touch was brief but electrifying. Come on, he said, standing and offering his hand. There's more to see. By the time they returned to the farmhouse for lunch, Eduarda felt like she'd known Augusto for years, not days. There was an ease between them that she'd never experienced with anyone else, not even Roberto. As they pulled up to the house, Eduarda noticed another vehicle parked in the driveway, a small, sensible sedan. Are you expecting someone? She asked. Augusto frowned. No, but that's Dr. Helena's car. She's the town doctor. They found Dr. Helena waiting on the front porch, a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind practical glasses. Augusto, she said, standing as they approached. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Maria at the market mentioned you had a guest who might need my services. Her eyes moved to Eduarda's belly. News travels fast, Augusto said with a rueful smile. Dr. Helena shrugged. Small town, you know how it is. She extended her hand to Eduarda. I'm Helena Oliveira, Valle Verde's only doctor. Eduarda Santos, she replied, shaking the doctor's hand. It's nice to meet you. I run a clinic in town, Dr. Helena explained. If you need prenatal care, I'd be happy to help. No pressure, of course. Eduarda felt a wave of relief. She'd been worried about finding medical care. I would appreciate that very much. It's been difficult to see a doctor recently. Dr. Helena's eyes were understanding. Why don't you come by tomorrow morning? Around 10. We'll do a full checkup. I'll drive you, Augusto offered immediately. Perfect, Dr. Helena said with a smile. And don't worry about payment. We can figure something out. After the doctor left, Eduarda turned to Augusto. Everyone here is so kind. Not everyone, he warned, but the good people outnumber the others. The next morning, true to his word, Augusto drove Eduarda to Dr. Helena's clinic, a small, well-kept building on Valle Verde's main street. He insisted on waiting in the reception area during her appointment. Dr. Helena was thorough and gentle. She took Eduarda's history, performed an examination, and even did a portable ultrasound. There's your baby, she said, turning the screen so Eduarda could see the tiny figure. Everything looks perfect. Strong heartbeat, good size for 18 weeks. Eduarda stared at the screen, mesmerized. That's really my baby. It sure is, Dr. Helena said with a smile. Would you like to know the sex? Eduarda hesitated, then nodded. It's a girl, the doctor said. Congratulations. A girl, Eduarda repeated, tears filling her eyes. I'm having a daughter. When the examination was complete, Dr. Helena handed Eduarda a printed image from the ultrasound. For the baby book, she said. Now, would you like to invite Augusto in to see? Some fathers like to... She stopped, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't assume. It's okay, Eduarda said quickly. Augusto isn't the father, he's just... She paused, not sure how to describe what Augusto was to her. A friend. But, yes, I'd like him to see, if that's okay. Augusto entered the exam room with a mixture of hesitation and curiosity. When Dr. Helena showed him the ultrasound image, his face transformed with wonder. That's the baby, he asked, his voice filled with awe. That's her, Eduarda said. It's a girl. A girl, he repeated, his eyes shining. She's beautiful. Dr. Helena watched them with a knowing smile. "Everything looks great, Eduarda. I want to see you again in 4 weeks. Sooner if you have any concerns." As they left the clinic, Eduarda felt lighter than she had in months. She had a healthy baby girl growing inside her. She had found medical care, and she had Augusto by her side, looking at her with such warmth it made her heart ache. "We should celebrate," he said as they walked back to his truck. "How about lunch at Rosa's Cafe? Best empanadas in 3 counties." Rosa's Cafe was a charming little restaurant with checkered tablecloths and friendly service. Rosa herself, a round woman with a booming laugh, came to take their order. "Augusto Pereira," she exclaimed, "twice in 1 week. To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Special occasion, Rosa," he said, grinning. "We're celebrating." Rosa's eyes moved to Eduarda, then to her belly, then back to Augusto. Her eyebrows rose questioningly. "This is my friend Eduarda," Augusto explained. "She just had her first ultrasound. It's a girl." "A baby girl." Rosa clapped her hands together. "Wonderful news. Lunch is on the house." "That's not necessary." Eduarda began. "Nonsense," Rosa interrupted. "In Valle Verde we celebrate new life. It's tradition." She winked at Augusto. "And it's about time we had some good news around here." After Rosa left to get their drinks, Eduarda leaned across the table. "Do people think, are they assuming the baby is yours?" Augusto looked uncomfortable. "Probably. People talk. Does that bother you?" She thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. Does it bother you?" His eyes met hers, serious and sincere. "No, it doesn't bother me at all." The moment was interrupted by the cafe door banging. Open. Camilla stood there, her face flushed with anger. Behind her was an older man with steel-grey hair and cold eyes, a man who radiated power and authority. "There you are," Camilla said, striding toward their table. "I've been looking all over for you." "Camilla," Augusto said, standing. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, her voice rising. "What's wrong is that my fiancé is parading around town with another woman." She turned her glare on Eduarda. "And not just any woman, a pregnant one." The older man stepped forward. "Augusto," he said, his voice like ice. "Perhaps you'd like to explain what's going on." "Sebastian," Augusto acknowledged with a stiff nod. "This is Eduarda Santos. She's staying at the farm temporarily. I was just helping her get settled in Valle Verde." "By taking her to lunch, to Rosa's?" Camilla demanded. "That's our place, Augusto." The entire cafe had gone silent, everyone watching. The drama unfold. "Camilla, please," Augusto said quietly. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" She laughed bitterly. "You're the one with your hands all over her in public." "That's not true," Eduarda said, finding her voice. "Augusto has been nothing but a gentleman." Sebastian Ferreira turned his cold gaze on Eduarda. "Young woman, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but Augusto is engaged to my daughter. They have been since they were teenagers." "That's not exactly," Augusto began. "Not now," Sebastian cut him off. "We'll discuss this privately." He turned to his daughter. "Camilla, wait in the car. Augusto and I need to talk business." Camilla shot one last venomous look at Eduarda before storming out. Sebastian gestured to a table in the corner, and Augusto reluctantly followed him. Eduarda sat alone, acutely aware of the stares and whispers around her. This was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. Judgment, gossip, humiliation. She considered leaving, but where would she go? She didn't even have the truck keys. From across the room, she could see Sebastian talking intently to Augusto, his face stern and uncompromising. Augusto's shoulders were tense, his expression growing more troubled by the moment. Finally, the men stood. Sebastian left without a backward glance. Augusto returned to Eduarda, his face grim. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, sitting down heavily. "What did he say to you?" she asked. Augusto ran a hand through his hair. "Sebastian supplies most of the seeds and equipment for my farm. He's just made it clear that if I don't handle this situation, he'll cancel our contracts." He sighed. "Without those supplies, I could lose everything." "By handle this situation, he means me, doesn't he?" Eduarda said quietly. Augusto nodded reluctantly. "He wants you gone by the end of the week." Eduarda felt sick. Once again, she was being cast out, treated like a problem to be solved. "I understand," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll leave tomorrow." "No," Augusto said firmly, surprising her. "That's not happening." "But your farm is mine," he said, his jaw set stubbornly. "Sebastian Ferreira doesn't get to dictate who stays in my home." "Augusto, be reasonable," Eduarda pleaded. "You could lose everything. I'm not worth that." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Yes, you are." The conviction in his voice took her breath away. "I'll find another supplier. I'll figure something out." "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know?" Augusto's eyes held hers. "Because sometimes you just know when something's right. And this, you being here, it feels right." Eduarda's heart pounded in her chest. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. No one had ever made her feel so valued. "Now," Augusto said, forcing a smile, "let's order those empanadas. We still have something to celebrate, remember?" By the time they left Rosa's, the whole incident seemed almost dreamlike to Eduarda. Had Augusto really defied Sebastian Ferreira for her? Had he really chosen her over his business interests, over Camila? As they drove back to the farm, Augusto was unusually quiet. Eduarda watched his profile, wondering what he was thinking. "I meant what I said in there," he said finally, as if reading her thoughts. "I don't want you to leave. I don't want to cause problems for you," she said. "You're not the one causing problems," he replied. "Sebastian and Camila, they've been trying to control me just like my father did. Maybe it's time I stood up for myself." He glanced at her. "For what I want." "And what do you want, Augusto?" she asked softly. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road and turned to face her. "I want to help you, Eduarda. I want to be there for you and your daughter. I want—" He hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek gently. "I want to see where this goes." Eduarda's breath caught. She knew she should be cautious. She'd trusted Roberto and he'd abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. But something about Augusto was different. His eyes were honest, his touch gentle. "I'm scared," she admitted. "The last time I trusted someone—" "I'm not him," Augusto said firmly. "I would never abandon you or your baby." "You can't promise that," she whispered. "Yes, I can," he said, "and I do." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. A soft, sweet kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When he pulled back, his eyes were questioning, seeking her approval. Eduarda answered by leaning in and kissing him again, more deeply this time. It felt right, like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, Augusto was smiling, a genuine, joyful smile that lit up his entire face. "Let's go home," he said. Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. But as they drove the rest of the way to the farm, Eduarda couldn't shake a sense of unease. Sebastian Ferreira didn't seem like a man who gave up easily. And Camila, the fury in her eyes had been real. Augusto might believe they could defy the Ferreiras and live happily ever after, but Eduarda knew better. The real battle was just beginning. When they reached the farmhouse, Augusto's phone was ringing. He answered it in the kitchen while Eduarda went to freshen up. She was just about to rejoin him when she heard his raised voice. "That's not fair, Sebastian." "No, I won't." "You can't do that." She paused in the hallway listening. "You're talking about my livelihood. I need those supplies. No, I understand, but—" Augusto's voice sounded desperate now. "Fine, I'll think about it. Just give me a few days." When she entered the kitchen, Augusto was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. "What happened?" she asked, though she already knew. He looked up, his expression anguished. "Sebastian has cancelled all our contracts. He's calling in the loans my father took out, loans I didn't even know existed." He took a shaky breath. "If I don't pay them back in 30 days, I'll lose the farm." "Because of me," Eduarda said, her heart sinking. "No," Augusto said firmly, "because Sebastian Ferreira is a controlling, vindictive man who can't stand not getting his way." He reached for her hand. "This isn't your fault." "What are you going to do?" Augusto squeezed her hand. "Fight. I'm going to fight for my farm. And for us." As he pulled her into his arms, Eduarda wanted desperately to believe him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had brought this trouble down on him, just as she had brought trouble to everyone who tried to help her. That night, as Augusto slept beside her, she made a decision. She wouldn't let him lose everything because of her. She wouldn't be responsible for destroying his life, just as Roberto had accused her of trying to destroy his. She would leave Valle Verde. She would find somewhere else to start over, somewhere Augusto could forget her and make peace with the Ferreiras. It would break her heart to go, but she had no choice, because sometimes loving someone meant letting them go. The early morning air was cool as Eduarda crept through the farmhouse, her small suitcase in hand. She paused at Augusto's bedroom door, listening to his steady breathing. Part of her wanted to go in to see his face one last time, but she knew if she did, she might lose her resolve. Instead, she left a letter on the kitchen table. In it, she thanked him for his kindness and explained that she couldn't be responsible for him losing his farm. She didn't tell him where she was going, partly because she didn't know herself and partly because she feared he might follow her. The walk to the bus station took nearly an hour. The sun was just rising as she reached the small building. No one was there yet except for an elderly man sweeping the floor. "Morning, miss," he greeted her. "You're up early." "When does the first bus leave?" she asked. He checked a tattered schedule on the wall. 9 o'clock to Riverside. That's about 50 miles east of here. Eduarda nodded. Riverside would do. She'd never been there, but it had to be big enough to find a job, a place to live. She'd bought a ticket with some of the money Augusto had insisted on giving her for helping with the farm books. As she waited on that same wooden bench where Augusto had first found her, she placed a hand on her belly. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, "but we'll be okay." She thought about Augusto waking up, finding her letter. Would he be angry, relieved? Would he go back to Camilla, make peace with Sebastian, save his farm? She hoped so. He deserved happiness, security, things she couldn't give him. The station began to fill with people as 9 o'clock approached. Eduarda kept her head down, afraid someone might recognize her and tell Augusto where she'd gone. The bus pulled in, wheezing and groaning. She stood, picked up her suitcase. "Eduarda!" She froze. That voice, she knew that voice. Turning slowly, she saw Augusto running toward her, his face flushed, her letter clutched in his hand. "What are you doing?" he demanded when he reached her, breathing hard from the run. "What needs to be done?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I won't let you lose your farm because of me." "So you were just going to disappear, without even saying goodbye?" The hurt in his eyes was almost more than she could bear. "It seemed easier that way," she said weakly. "Easier," he repeated. "How is it easier to wake up and find you gone, to read this?" He held up the letter. "Nothing about this is easy, Eduarda." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But Sebastian made it clear." "I don't care what Sebastian Ferreira says or wants," Augusto interrupted. "This is my life, not his. But your farm is just land and buildings," he said firmly. "It matters to me, yes, but not as much as—" He stopped as if afraid to say the words. "All aboard for Riverside," the bus driver called. Eduarda glanced at the bus, then back at Augusto. "I have to go," she said, though the words felt like stones in her mouth. "No, you don't," he insisted. "Come back with me. We'll figure this out together." "How?" she asked, tears starting to fall. "Sebastian will ruin you." Augusto stepped closer, taking her free hand in his. "Let him try. I'm not afraid of him." "Well, I am," she admitted. "I'm scared of what he'll do to you, to us. I've already lost everything once, Augusto. I can't bear to watch you lose everything because of me. Is that what you think, that I'd resent you?" He shook his head. "Eduarda, don't you understand? None of it means anything without you." The bus horn sounded, an impatient blast. "Last call. For Riverside," the driver shouted. Eduarda looked into Augusto's eyes and saw no doubt there, only determination and something else, something that made her heart race. "Stay," he said softly. "Please." Slowly, she nodded. "Okay." Relief washed over his face. He took her suitcase, put his arm around her shoulders, and led her back toward his truck. "What are we going to do about Sebastian?" she asked as they drove back to the farm. "I have an idea about that," Augusto said. I've been up all night thinking. There's someone we need to see. Instead of turning toward the farm, Augusto drove into town. He parked in front of a small building with a sign that read, Valle Verde Gazette, serving our community, since 1902. The newspaper? Eduarda asked, confused. Not just any newspaper, Augusto explained. Elena Martinez is the editor. She's been trying to expose Sebastian's business practices for years, but she's never had anyone willing to go on the record. And now she does? Eduarda guessed. Augusto nodded grimly. Sebastian didn't just threaten me. He's done the same to half the farmers in the county. Most are too afraid to speak out, but I'm not anymore. Inside the newspaper office, they met Eleanor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with streaks of grey in her dark hair. She listened intently as Augusto explained the situation. So he's calling in your father's loans as punishment for not marrying his daughter? Elena asked, scribbling notes. And for being with me, Eduarda added softly. Elena's eyes softened as they moved to Eduarda's pregnant belly. How far along? Are you, honey? Almost 5 months, Eduarda replied. Elena nodded thoughtfully. And Sebastian knows you're pregnant? Yes, Augusto confirmed. He and Camilla caught us having lunch at Rosa's yesterday after Eduarda's doctor appointment. Interesting, Elena murmured. So he's not just bullying a farmer, he's threatening a pregnant woman's housing security. She looked up at Augusto. And you're willing to go on the record with all of this? Yes, Augusto said without hesitation. And I think I can get others to speak up too. Marco Oliveira, for one. Sebastian's been squeezing him for years. This could be risky, Elena warned. Sebastian has a lot of power in this town. I know, Augusto said, but someone has to stand up to him. Elena smiled, a fierce, determined smile. Well then, let's get started. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Augusto spent his days working the farm and his evenings talking to other farmers, convincing them to share their stories with Elena. To Eduarda's surprise, many agreed. It seemed Sebastian Ferreira had made plenty of enemies over the years, people who were just waiting for someone brave enough to lead the way. Eduarda helped by organizing the farm's financial records, creating a clear paper trail of Sebastian's unfair pricing and punitive contract terms. Her accounting skills proved invaluable as they built their case. One evening, as they sat on the porch going over documents, Augusto looked up at her with admiration. "You're amazing," he said. "I don't know how I would have done this without you." She smiled, feeling a warm glow of pride. "We make a good team." "Yes, we do," he agreed, reaching for her hand. "How are you feeling? Is all this stress too much for you and the baby?" "We're fine," she assured him, placing her free hand on her growing belly. "She's quite active today, actually. Want to feel?" Augusto nodded eagerly. Eduarda took his hand and placed it on the spot where her daughter had been kicking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, was that... Augusto's eyes widened in wonder. "That's her," Eduarda confirmed, smiling at his expression. "Hello, little one," he whispered, keeping his hand on Eduarda's belly. "I'm Augusto." The baby kicked again, as if in response, and they both laughed. "She likes you," Eduarda said softly. Augusto looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I like her too, and her mother." Before she could respond, his phone rang. It was Elena. "The story runs tomorrow," she told him when he answered. Front page. Local businessman accused of strong-arm tactics and predatory lending. How many farmers went on the record? Augusto asked. 12, Elena replied, sounding pleased. Plus 3 former employees of Ferreira Agricultural Supplies. Sebastian doesn't know what's about to hit him. After he hung up, Augusto turned to Eduarda with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's happening. Tomorrow morning, everyone in Valle Verde will know what kind of man Sebastian Ferreira really is." "Do you think it will be enough?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's a start." They didn't have to wait long for Sebastian's response. The next morning, just as they were sitting down to breakfast, Camilla's SUV screeched into the driveway. She stormed up to the house and pounded on the door. Augusto opened it calmly. "Camilla! How dare you!" she hissed, waving a copy of the newspaper in his face. "My father is furious. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've told the truth, Augusto said simply. Camilla's eyes narrowed as she spotted Eduarda at the kitchen table. This is all because of her, isn't it? You've ruined everything we've built together for some pregnant nobody. That's enough, Camilla, Augusto said, his voice firm. Eduarda has nothing to do with your father's business practices. Those are on him. He's calling an emergency board meeting, Camilla warned. He's going to destroy you, Augusto. And when he's done, when you've lost everything, don't come crawling back to me. I wouldn't dream of it, Augusto replied coolly. Camilla's face flushed with anger. She turned to Eduarda. You think you've won? This isn't over, not by a long shot. With that, she stormed back to her car and drove away, gravel flying. Well, Eduarda said shakily, that went about as well as expected. Augusto rejoined her at the table, taking her hand. Are you okay? She nodded. What happens now? Now we wait, he said, and see how Valle Verde responds. The response was swift and overwhelming. By noon, the farm's phone was ringing constantly. Farmers from all over the county called to offer their support. Some had supplies they could share. Others knew alternative vendors Augusto could work with. Even Rosa from the cafe stopped by with a casserole and words of encouragement. Sebastian Ferreira has had this coming for years, she declared. My cousin lost his farm because of that man's loans. It's about time someone stood up to him. The most surprising call came from Luis Ferreira, Sebastian's younger brother and Camilla's uncle. I've been watching Sebastian's methods for years, he told Augusto. I never approved, but I was a minority shareholder. Now, with all this publicity, the board is reconsidering his leadership. I want to meet with you. They arranged to meet Luis at Elena's office the next day. He turned out to be a thoughtful man in his 60s, very different from his domineering brother. I've brought a proposal, Luis said, sliding a folder across the table. The board is prepared to restructure all the loans Sebastian called in. Not just yours, but all 12 farmers mentioned in the article. We're also offering new supply contracts at fair market rates. Augusto looked through the documents, then passed them to Eduarda. She reviewed the terms with her accountant's eye. These look legitimate, she confirmed. The interest rates are reasonable, and there are no hidden penalties. In return, Luis continued, we ask that you issue a joint statement with Ferreira Agricultural Supplies announcing a new era of cooperation. No more negative press. And Sebastian, Augusto asked, where does he stand on this? Luis sighed. My brother has been removed from his position as CEO, pending a full audit of the company's practices. I'm interim CEO until the board selects a permanent replacement. Augusto and Eduarda exchanged surprised glances. And Camilla? Eduarda asked quietly. My niece is understandably upset, Luis acknowledged. She's gone to stay with her mother in the city for a while. I think some distance will do her good. After Luis left, Elena turned to them with a grin. Congratulations. You just took down Valle Verde's biggest bully. We couldn't have done it. Without you, Augusto told her. Elena shrugged. That's what journalism is supposed to do, give a voice to the voiceless. On the drive home, Augusto was unusually quiet. Eduarda studied his profile, wondering what he was thinking. Are you okay? She asked finally. I'm just processing everything, he said. Yesterday I thought I might lose the farm. Today I've got fair loans, new contracts, and Sebastian Ferreira is out of power. He shook his head in disbelief. And it's all because of you. Me? Eduarda was surprised. I didn't do anything. You did everything, he insisted. You gave me the courage to stand up to him. You organized the financial records that proved his predatory practices. You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road, the same spot where he'd kissed her for the first time, and turned to face her. Eduarda Santos, he said, taking both her hands in his. I think I'm falling in love with you. Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. Augusto, we've only known each other a few weeks, I know, he acknowledged, and maybe it's crazy, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. When you tried to leave yesterday, it was like my whole world was ending. He squeezed her hands gently. I don't want to scare you. I know you've been hurt before. I just needed you to know how I feel. Eduarda looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. Could it be possible? Could someone like Augusto truly love someone like her? Pregnant, homeless, with nothing to offer but herself? I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. We can be terrified together. As they drove the rest of the way home, Eduarda felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since discovering she was pregnant, she allowed herself to imagine a future, a real future with Augusto by her side. A home for her daughter, a family, but her happiness was short-lived. When they reached the farmhouse, Augusto's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened. "When?" he asked sharply. "Is anyone hurt?" "Yes, we'll be right there." "What's happened?" Eduarda asked, fear gripping her heart. "There's been a fire in the barn," he said, already turning the truck around. "Marco says it's bad." They could see the smoke from a mile away, a thick, black column rising into the blue sky. As they got closer, the flashing lights of fire trucks came into view. Firefighters were battling the blaze, but it was clear they were too late. The barn was engulfed in flames. Marco Oliveira, an older farmer who lived on the neighboring property, hurried over as they parked. "I saw it from my place," he explained, his face grim. "Called it in right away, but it was already out of control. Like someone had doused the place in gasoline." "Or someone did," Augusto said, his voice hard. "Did you see anyone?" Marco hesitated. "I can't be sure, but I thought I saw Camilla's SUV driving away just as the fire started." Eduarda gasped. "Camilla? But her uncle said she left town." "Apparently not," Augusto said grimly. A firefighter approached them, removing his helmet. "We've contained it to the barn, but I'm afraid it's a total loss. All the equipment inside, too." "The harvester?" Augusto asked, his voice strained. "The tractor." The firefighter shook his head regretfully. "Everything, I'm sorry." Augusto turned away, his shoulders slumped. The barn had contained most of his farming equipment he needed for the upcoming harvest. Eduarda moved to his side, placing a hand on his arm. "Augusto, I'm so sorry." "Sheriff's deputies are treating it as possible arson," the firefighter continued. "They're looking for evidence, witnesses. Tell them to talk to Marco," Augusto said. He saw Camila Ferreira's vehicle. The firefighter nodded and moved away. Augusto stood staring at the burning barn, his expression unreadable. "What will you do now?" Eduarda asked softly. "Rebuild," he said, his voice firm despite the devastation in his eyes. "It's just a barn, Eduarda, just equipment. It can be replaced. But the harvest will be challenging," he acknowledged. "But we'll manage. The community will help. That's what Valle Verde does. We help each other." As if to prove his point, Marco approached them again, this time with several other farmers. "Augusto," he said, "we've been talking. We all have equipment we can lend you. Between us, we can get your fields harvested." "We take care of our own," another farmer added. "You stood up for all of us against Sebastian. Now it's our turn to stand with you." Tears welled in Eduarda's eyes as farmer after farmer came forward, offering help, equipment, labor. This was what a community should be, people supporting each other in times of need. By evening, the fire was out, leaving only the smoldering ruins of the barn. Augusto and Eduarda sat on the farmhouse porch, exhausted and soot-stained, but not defeated. "I can't believe Camilla would do this," Eduarda said, still shocked by the day's events. "I can," Augusto replied sadly. "She never could handle not getting her way, and she hates losing more than anything." "Do you think the sheriff will arrest her?" "Maybe, if they can prove it was her." He sighed deeply. "Part of me hopes they don't. The Ferreira family has suffered enough public scandal." Eduarda studied his face in the fading light. "You're an incredibly forgiving man, Augusto Pereira," he smiled wearily. "Not forgiving, just tired of the fighting." Sheriff Mendez arrived as the sun was setting. He was a serious man with a thick mustache and world-weary eyes. "We found a gas can near the scene," he told them, "and tire tracks that match Miss Ferreira's vehicle. We're bringing her in for questioning." Augusto nodded, his expression grim. "Thank you, Sheriff." After the sheriff left, Eduarda moved closer to Augusto on the porch swing, resting her head on his shoulder. "What a day," she murmured. "Not exactly what I had planned when I told you I was falling in love with you," he said ruefully. Despite everything, she laughed. "Does anything ever go according to plan?" "Not in my experience," he admitted, putting his arm around her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. "I meant what I said earlier," Augusto said finally. "Before all this happened. I am falling in love with you, Eduarda, and not even Camila Ferreira and her matches can change that." Eduarda turned her face up to his. "I love you too, Augusto. I think I have since that first day when you offered water to a stranger on a bench." He kissed her then, a tender, gentle kiss that held promises of the future. Later that night, as they lay together in his bed, Eduarda felt the baby kick, stronger than ever before. She guided Augusto's hand to the spot. "She's feisty tonight," he said with a smile. "She's dancing," Eduarda corrected. "Celebrating." "Celebrating what?" "Finding home," Eduarda said softly, "just like her mother." The next morning, Eduarda woke to find Augusto's side of the bed empty. A note on his pillow read, "Gone to meet with the insurance adjuster. Back soon. I love you." Those last 3 words made her smile. She showered and dressed, then went downstairs to make breakfast. She was just pouring coffee when a knock came at the door. Expecting Dr. Helena for her scheduled checkup, Eduarda opened the door with a smile that quickly faded. Standing on the porch was a tall, elegant woman she'd never seen before. The woman was expensively dressed, with perfectly styled hair and familiar features that made Eduarda's heart sink. "Are you Eduarda Santos?" the woman asked, her tone cool but not unfriendly. "Yes," Eduarda replied cautiously. "And you are?" "Victoria Ferreira, Sebastian's wife, Camila's mother." The woman's eyes moved to Eduarda's belly, then back to her face. "May I come in? We need to talk." Reluctantly, Eduarda stepped aside. "Augusto isn't here." "I know," Victoria interrupted. "I waited until he left. This conversation needs to be between us women." Eduarda led her to the kitchen, anxiety building in her chest. "Would you like coffee?" "No, thank you," Victoria declined, taking a seat at the table. She studied Eduarda with calculating eyes. "So you're the woman who's caused all this trouble?" "I didn't," Victoria held up a hand. "I'm not here to assign blame. What's done is done. Sebastian has lost his position. Camila is facing criminal charges for arson. Our family name is being dragged through the mud." She sighed. "But I'm a practical woman, Ms. Santos. I believe in solutions, not recriminations." "What kind of solution?" Eduarda asked warily. Victoria opened her designer handbag and removed a checkbook. "A financial one. How much would it take for you to leave Valle Verde, to leave Augusto Pereira and never return?" Eduarda stared at her, stunned. "You want to pay me off?" "I want to end this situation before anyone else gets hurt," Victoria corrected. "My husband was wrong to threaten Augusto's farm. My daughter was wrong to burn his barn. But you and I both know this relationship between you and Augusto can't last." "Why not?" Eduarda demanded. Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Because you're carrying another man's child. Because you've known each other for less than a month. Because this passion was born in crisis, and such things rarely survive in calmer times." She tapped her checkbook. "Name your price, enough to start fresh somewhere else, enough to provide for your child." Eduarda felt anger rising within her. "I'm not for sale, Mrs. Ferreira, and neither are my feelings for Augusto." "Everyone has a price," Victoria insisted. "Think of your baby. Think of the security this money could provide." "The only security my daughter needs is love," Eduarda said firmly. "And she has that here, with Augusto. With me." Victoria studied her for a long moment. "You really do love him, don't you?" "With all my heart," Eduarda confirmed. A sad smile crossed Victoria's face. "I loved Sebastian like that once, believed in him completely." She sighed. "Be careful, my dear. Love can blind us to harsh realities." "And what reality am I missing?" Eduarda asked. "That Valle Verde is a small town with a long memory," Victoria said. "That people will always see you as the outsider who came between Augusto and Camila. That your child will always be the one whose father didn't want her." The cruel words struck Eduarda like physical blows. Her hand moved protectively to her belly. Victoria's eyes followed the movement. Her expression changed, becoming almost gentle. I don't say these things to hurt you. I say them because I've lived in Valle Verde all my life. I know how it works. Maybe it's time things changed, a voice said from the doorway. Both women turned to see Augusto standing there, his face tight with anger. How long have you been there? Victoria asked, closing her checkbook. Long enough, he replied coldly. Long enough to hear you try to bribe the woman I love into leaving me. I was trying to be practical, Victoria defended herself, to spare everyone more pain. The only pain here is coming from you and your family, Augusto said. First Sebastian, then Camilla, now you. When will you Ferreiras understand? You can't control everything and everyone. Victoria stood, gathering her dignity around her like a cloak. I see there's no reasoning with either of you. I hope for both your sakes that this infatuation lasts. She moved toward the door, then paused. And Eduarda, despite what you may think, I wish you well with your baby. No child should suffer for the mistakes of their parents. After she left, Augusto rushed to Eduarda's side. Are you okay? What else did she say to you? Nothing that matters, Eduarda assured him, though Victoria's words about Valle Verde's long memory still echoed in her mind. Augusto pulled her into his arms. I'm so sorry you had to face her alone. It's okay, she said, resting her head against his chest. I handled it. Yes, you did, he agreed, pride in his voice. You were magnificent. I'm not for sale, he quoted with a smile. Eduarda looked up at him. You don't think she's right, do you? About us not lasting? No, he said firmly. Victoria Ferreira doesn't know the first thing about us. About what we've built together. And the town, do you think they'll always see me as the outsider? The one who broke up you and Camilla? Augusto cradled her face in his hands. Anyone who matters knows the truth, that Camilla and I were never really together, not in the ways that count. And as for you being an outsider, he smiled softly. You belong here, Eduarda, with me, if you want to. I do, she whispered. More than anything. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and certainty. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I have something to ask you, he said. Something I've been thinking about for days. But after everything that's happened, I'm not sure if the timing is right. Ask me, she encouraged. Augusto took a deep breath. Will you marry me, Eduarda? Will you and your daughter be my family? Joy washed over her, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes, we will. His face lit up with happiness. Really? Really, she confirmed with a watery smile. He hugged her tightly, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, his eyes were serious despite his smile. I want you to know, he said, that I'm not asking because of the baby, or because of Victoria, or any of that. I'm asking because I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. No, she said softly. That's why I said yes. Outside, the charred remains of the barn were a reminder of all they'd faced, but as Augusto held her close, Eduarda knew they would rebuild. Not just the barn, but a life together, a home for their family. Victoria's words about Valle Verde's long memory faded away, replaced by the certainty of Augusto's love. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. They were no longer alone. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The barn was rebuilt with the help of neighbors and friends, bigger and better than before. Augusto's harvest came in successfully, thanks to the borrowed equipment from other farmers. And Eduarda's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her belly now large and round as she entered her 8th month. They had decided to wait until after the baby was born to get married, but Augusto insisted that Eduarda move into the master bedroom permanently. This is your home now, he'd said, yours and the baby's. The guest room was transformed into a nursery, painted a soft yellow with white curtains. Augusto had built a crib himself, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. Doctor Helena had pronounced both mother and baby to be in perfect health, though she warned Eduarda to rest more as her due date approached. Everything's ready, Augusto said one evening as they sat on the porch swing. his arm around her shoulders. "We have diapers, clothes, bottles, and what else do we need?" "A name," Eduarda replied, placing her hand on her belly. "We still haven't decided on a name for her." "What about Hope?" Augusto suggested. "It seems fitting." Eduarda smiled. "Esperança," she said, using the Portuguese version of the name. "It's beautiful. Esperança Pereira," Augusto said, testing it out. "I like it." Eduarda looked up at him in surprise. "Pereira? But we're not married yet, and she's not... I mean, biologically she's not... She's mine in all the ways that matter," Augusto said firmly. "Unless you don't want her to have my name?" "Of course I do," Eduarda assured him, tears filling her eyes. "I just didn't expect... You're so good, Augusto, so much better than I deserve." He kissed her forehead gently. "You deserve everything good in this world, Eduarda. I'm just grateful I get to be part of it." The next morning, they were having breakfast when Augusto's phone rang. The call was brief, and when he hung up, his expression was serious. "That was Sheriff Mendez," he said. "Camilla's trial starts today. He wanted to let us know we might be called to testify." Eduarda nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. In the weeks following the bonfire, Camilla had maintained her innocence despite the evidence against her. She'd hired expensive lawyers from the city who had managed to delay the trial with various motions and appeals. "How do you feel about testifying?" she asked Augusto. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to. Despite everything, Camilla and I have known each other since we were children. But if I have to, I will. The truth matters." "What about Sebastian and Victoria?" Eduarda asked. The Ferreiras had been noticeably absent from Valle Verde since the scandal broke. According to town gossip, they were staying at their vacation home in Europe. "Louis says they'll return for the trial," Augusto replied. "They're standing by Camila, of course." The thought of facing the entire Ferreira family in court made Eduarda's stomach clench with anxiety. She must have looked worried, because Augusto immediately moved to her side. "Hey," he said softly, taking her hands in his. "It'll be okay. You don't have to be there if you don't want to." "No, I should go," she said, squaring her shoulders. "We face things together now, remember?" He smiled, kissing her gently. "Always." The Valle Verde courthouse was small, but dignified, with wooden benches and tall windows that let in the morning light. Eduarda and Augusto sat in the back row, trying to avoid the curious stares of the townspeople who had come to watch the proceedings. Camila sat at the defense table, looking pale but composed, in a conservative navy dress. Her parents were directly behind her, Sebastian stern and unyielding, Victoria elegant and remote. None of them acknowledged Augusto and Eduarda's presence. The prosecutor, a young, earnest woman named Daniela Vargas, laid out the case against Camila methodically. The gas can with Camilla's fingerprints, the tire tracks matching her SUV, a witness who had seen her near the farm around the time of the fire. "The evidence is clear," Ms. Vargas concluded. "Ms. Ferreira set fire to Mr. Pereira's barn as an act of revenge for his rejection of her, and for her father's loss of position at Ferreira Agricultural Supplies." Camilla's lawyer, a sleek, expensive-looking man from the city, countered with claims of contaminated evidence and unreliable witnesses. He suggested that Augusto himself might have started the fire for the insurance money. Eduarda felt Augusto tense beside her at that accusation. She squeezed his hand reassuringly. The first day of the trial ended without a resolution. As they filed out of the courtroom, Eduarda found herself face to face with Victoria Ferreira in the narrow hallway. "Miss Santos," Victoria acknowledged with a cool nod. "Mrs. Ferreira," Eduarda replied, equally formal. Victoria's eyes moved to Eduarda's prominent belly. "When is the baby due?" 3 weeks, Eduarda said, surprised by the question. Something like concern flickered in Victoria's eyes. "Take care of yourself. First babies are often difficult." Before Eduarda could respond, Sebastian appeared at his wife's side. His gaze hardened when he saw Augusto. "Pereira," he said coldly, "I hope you're satisfied. Your accusations have dragged my daughter into court and my family's name through the mud." "Your daughter set fire to my barn," Augusto replied evenly, "and your business practices were unethical long before I spoke. Out about them. Sebastian's face flushed with anger. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Yes, it is, Augusto said firmly. It's over, Sebastian, let it go. For a moment it seemed like Sebastian might lunge at Augusto, but Victoria placed a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Come, Sebastian, she said quietly. This isn't the place. With a last glare at Augusto, Sebastian allowed his wife to lead him away. Well, Eduarda said as they walked to the truck, that was intense. It always is with Sebastian, Augusto said wearily. He never could accept losing at anything. The trial continued for 3 more days. Augusto was called to testify on the second day, calmly recounting the events leading up to the fire and the damage it had caused. And do you believe the defendant, Camila Ferreira, set the fire? Ms. Vargas asked. Augusto hesitated, then spoke carefully. I believe the evidence points to her involvement. But do you, personally, believe she did it? The prosecutor pressed. Augusto looked directly at Camila, who stared back defiantly. Yes, he said finally. I believe she did. On the third day, Marco Oliveira testified about seeing Camila's SUV driving away from the farm just as the fire started. Despite aggressive cross-examination by Camila's lawyer, Marco stuck to his story. By the end of the 4th day, both sides had presented their cases. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, instructed the jury to deliberate carefully and without bias. Justice must be served, she told them, regardless of the defendant's family name or social standing. Eduarda and Augusto went home to wait for the verdict. That evening, as Eduarda was preparing dinner, she felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She gasped, grabbing the edge of the counter for support. Eduarda. Augusto was at her side instantly. What's wrong? Just back pain, she said, trying to smile. Dr. Helena said it's normal at this stage. Augusto didn't look convinced. Maybe you should lie down. I'll finish dinner. She nodded, letting him lead her to the living room sofa. The pain had subsided, but she felt strangely restless. They had just finished eating when Sheriff Mendez called. The jury's back, he told Augusto. They'll read the verdict first thing tomorrow morning. That was quick, Augusto remarked after. Hanging up, is that good or bad? Eduarda asked. Hard to say, he replied. Either they found the case very clear-cut, or they didn't bother to really consider the evidence. That night, Eduarda couldn't sleep. Her back ached, and the baby seemed unusually active, kicking and squirming. Around midnight, she felt a new sensation, a tightening across her abdomen that came and went. Augusto, she whispered, shaking him gently, I think I might be in labor. He was instantly alert. Are you sure it's early? Not that early, she said, wincing as another contraction began. Only 3 weeks. Augusto jumped out of bed, pulling on clothes. I'll call Dr. Helena. How far apart are the contractions? I don't know, Eduarda admitted. I've been having back pain all evening, but the real contractions just started. Dr. Helena answered her phone on the 3rd ring, her voice calm and reassuring. After asking several questions, she said, It sounds like early labor. Try to rest. Walk a little if it helps with the pain. Call me when the contractions are 5 minutes apart, or if your water breaks. For the next several hours, Eduarda paced the farmhouse, pausing to breathe through contractions while Augusto timed them. By dawn, they were 6 minutes apart. The verdict is at 9, Augusto said, looking torn. But I'm not leaving you. You should go, Eduarda insisted. I'm doing fine and Dr. Helena says it could be hours still. First babies often take their time. I don't know. He hesitated. Please, she said. I want to know what happens with Camila. We both do. Finally, he agreed, but only after extracting a promise that she would call immediately if anything changed. After he left, Eduarda continued pacing, breathing, through contractions that were gradually getting stronger. She was in the kitchen when she felt a sudden gush of fluid down her legs. Oh, she said aloud, that would be my water breaking. She reached for her phone to call Augusto, but another contraction hit, much stronger than before. She gasped, doubling over in pain. When it passed, she dialed Augusto's number, but the call went straight to voicemail. He must have turned his phone off in the courthouse. Next, she tried Dr. Helena, who answered immediately. My water broke, Eduarda told her, and the contractions are much stronger now. I'm on my way, Dr. Helena said. Don't try to drive yourself. Stay where you are. Eduarda sank onto a kitchen chair, feeling another contraction building. This one was so intense she cried out. When it passed, she realized with alarm that they were coming much faster now, barely 3 minutes apart. Esperanza was in a hurry, it seemed. Eduarda made her way to the living room sofa, pausing twice for contractions. She was just wondering if she should try to reach another neighbor when there was a knock at the door. Dr. Helena, she called, struggling to her feet. But when she opened the door, it wasn't the doctor standing there. It was Victoria Ferreira. Mrs. Ferreira, Eduarda said, confused. What are you... She broke off as another contraction gripped her, making her grasp the doorframe for support. Victoria's eyes widened in alarm. You're in labor, she said, moving quickly to Eduarda's side. Where's Augusto? At the courthouse, Eduarda managed through gritted teeth. For the verdict. Understanding crossed Victoria's face. Of course, I was going there myself when I saw his truck still here. I thought... She shook her head. Never mind what I thought. Let's get you inside. With Victoria's help, Eduarda made it back to the sofa. The older woman moved with surprising efficiency, finding towels and hot water without being asked. Have you called your doctor? Victoria asked, kneeling beside the sofa. Yes, Eduarda said, breathing hard. She's on her way. But I think the baby is coming faster than anyone expected. Victoria checked her watch. When did your water break? About 20 minutes ago, Eduarda said. The contractions are... She gasped as another one hit, stronger than before. Victoria took her hand. Breathe through it, she instructed. That's it. When the contraction passed, Eduarda looked at Victoria in surprise. You seem to know what you're doing. I had Camilla, Victoria said with a small smile. And I was a nurse before I married. Sebastian, it's been years, but some things you don't forget. Another contraction came, and Eduarda squeezed Victoria's hand hard. I'm scared, she admitted when she could speak again. It's happening so fast. You're doing beautifully, Victoria assured her. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Your body knows what to do. For the next half hour, Victoria stayed by Eduarda's side, coaching her through increasingly powerful contractions. When Dr. Helena finally arrived, she found them with Victoria supporting Eduarda as she paced. The living room. I see I have help, Dr. Helena said, taking in the scene with raised eyebrows. Mrs. Ferreira is a former nurse, Eduarda explained between breaths. Dr. Helena nodded. Good. Let's get you somewhere more comfortable for an examination. They helped. Eduarda to the bedroom. After a quick check, Dr. Helena looked up with a smile. You're fully dilated. This baby is coming now. But Augusto, Eduarda began. Won't make it back in time, Dr. Helena finished gently. Babies have their own schedules. I'll try to reach him, Victoria offered, stepping out of the room with her phone. The next hour was a blur of pain and effort for Eduarda. She pushed when told, rested when she could, and held tightly to Dr. Helena's encouraging words. Victoria returned, reporting that she couldn't reach Augusto but stayed to help, supporting Eduarda's back and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. One more big push, Dr. Helena urged finally. She's almost here. Gathering her last reserves of strength, Eduarda pushed with everything she had. There was a moment of intense pressure, then release, and the room filled with the indignant wail of a newborn. She's here, Dr. Helena announced, placing the tiny, squirming infant on Eduarda's chest. A beautiful, healthy girl. Tears streamed down Eduarda's face as she looked at her daughter for the first time. Esperanza had a shock of dark hair, a red, wrinkled face, and the strongest lungs Eduarda had ever heard. Hello, little one, she whispered. I've been waiting for you. Victoria stood back, her own eyes suspiciously bright. She's perfect, she said softly. As Dr. Helena busied herself with the afterbirth and cleaning up, Eduarda couldn't take her eyes off her daughter. All the pain, all the fear, all the uncertainty of the past months, it all seemed worth it for this moment. Thank you, she said to Victoria, for being here, for helping. Victoria smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her usually stern face. It was my honor. She hesitated, then added, I know we didn't start on the best terms, but perhaps we could begin again, for the sake of this little one. Before Eduarda could answer, they heard the sound of a truck screeching into the driveway, followed by running footsteps. The bedroom door burst open and Augusto stood there, his face frantic. Eduarda, he exclaimed, then stopped short at the tableau before him. Eduarda in bed, a tiny bundle in her arms, Victoria Ferreira standing beside them. You're a little late, Eduarda said with a tired smile. Your daughter decided not to wait. Augusto moved to the bed in a daze, his eyes fixed on the baby. She's here, he said in wonder. She's really here. Would you like to hold her? Eduarda asked. With trembling hands, Augusto took the swaddled infant. His face transformed with a love so pure it brought fresh tears to Eduarda's eyes. Hello, Esperanza, he whispered. I'm your papa. Victoria quietly slipped out of the room, giving the new family their privacy. Dr. Helena followed after ensuring both mother and baby were stable. I'm so sorry I wasn't here, Augusto said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. The verdict took longer than expected, and then my phone died. It's okay, Eduarda assured him. Mrs. Ferreira was here. She helped. Augusto looked surprised. Victoria, but why was she here? I'm not entirely sure, Eduarda admitted. She said she saw your truck and came to check on you. Augusto shook his head in disbelief. After everything that's happened with her family, people can surprise you, Eduarda said softly. What was the verdict? Augusto's expression turned serious. Guilty. Camilla was found guilty of arson. She'll be sentenced next week. He sighed. I don't feel as relieved as I thought I would. Because you've known her so long? Maybe. Or maybe because today puts everything in perspective. He looked down at Esperanza, who had fallen asleep in his arms. This is what matters, not barns or verdicts or old feuds. Eduarda reached out to touch his face. You're an amazing man, Augusto Pereira, and you're an incredible woman, he replied, leaning down to kiss her. Thank you for our daughter. She's not biologically yours, Eduarda reminded him gently. In every way that counts, she is, he insisted. I've loved her since I first felt her kick. I'll love her for the rest of my life. A week later, Eduarda stood in the farmhouse kitchen, watching through the window as Augusto showed Esperanza the sunrise. The baby was too young to appreciate the brilliant colors painting the sky, but Augusto spoke to her as if she understood. Every word, pointing out the reds and golds, the silhouette of trees against the brightening horizon. They had settled quickly into a routine of sorts. Nighttime feedings, diaper changes, stolen moments of sleep. Augusto had taken to fatherhood with a natural ease that filled Eduarda's heart with joy. In town, the news of Camilla's sentencing had been the main topic of conversation. The judge had ordered counseling and community service rather than jail time, a decision that had surprised many, but that Augusto had supported. Punishment won't heal what's broken in her, he'd told Eduarda. Maybe help will. The Ferreiras were selling their house in Valle Verde and moving permanently to the city, according to Rosa at the cafe. Sebastian had resigned from all his remaining positions at the company, leaving Luis in charge. Victoria had called once to check on Esperanza, a gesture of reconciliation that Eduarda had cautiously welcomed. Oh, you're deep in thought, Augusto said, coming up behind her with the baby cradled in his arms. Just reflecting on how much has changed, she replied, turning to face him. 3 months ago, I was alone on a bus to nowhere. Now I have a home, our daughter and you, and a wedding to plan, he reminded her with a smile. Unless you've changed your mind. She stood on tiptoe to kiss him. Never, but I think we should wait until Esperanza can be part of it. Maybe when she's a bit older. Whatever you want, he agreed, as long as we're together. A car pulled into the driveway, Dr. Helena arriving for Esperanza's 1-week checkup. As Augusto went to let her in, Eduarda took one more look at the sunrise. It was a new day, a new beginning, for all of them. Later that afternoon, with Esperanza napping after a clean bill of health from Dr. Helena, Augusto took Eduarda's hand and led her to the porch. I have something to show you, he said, seeming nervous. What is it? She asked, curious about his sudden seriousness. Instead of answering, He guided her to his truck. They drove the familiar route to his favorite thinking spot, the hill overlooking the farm. When they reached the top, Eduarda gasped in surprise. Where there had been only empty land before, the foundation of a house now stood, concrete poured, wooden frames marking out rooms. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Augusto. In confusion. "Our home," he said simply, "if you want it to be." "But we have the farmhouse," she said. "The farmhouse belongs to the past, to my grandfather, my father. This," he gestured to the foundation, "this is ours, our future, a place we build together, from the ground up." Eduarda walked slowly around the foundation, trying to picture the house it would become. It wasn't large, but it had a perfect view of the entire valley. "The porch will wrap around here," Augusto explained, following her. "So we can watch the sunset every evening, and this will be Esperanza's room, with a big window so she can see the stars. And maybe, someday, a room for a brother or sister." He trailed off, looking at her uncertainly. "If that's what you want," Eduarda felt tears fill her eyes, happy tears for once. "It's perfect, Augusto, absolutely perfect." "Really?" he asked, relief evident in his voice. "You're not disappointed it's not finished yet? I wanted to have more done before showing you, but then Esperanza arrived early and—" She stopped his words with a kiss. "It's perfect because we'll finish it together," she said when they broke apart. "Just like we've done everything else." He smiled, pulling her close. "I love you, Eduarda Santos. And I love you, Augusto Pereira." They stood together on the hill, looking out over the land that had become their home, thinking of the future they would build, not just a house, but a family, a legacy, a life filled with love. As the afternoon sun warmed their faces, Eduarda thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Valle Verde alone, afraid, with nothing but a small suitcase and a baby on the way. She had found not just shelter but love, not just acceptance but belonging. "What are you thinking?" Augusto asked, noticing her faraway expression. Eduarda smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I'm thinking that your first words to me were true. That day at the bus station you told me I wasn't alone." She placed her hand over his heart. "And thanks to you, I never will be again." Augusto's arms tightened around her. "Never," he agreed. "You and Esperanza are my family now, forever." As they returned to the farmhouse where their daughter slept, Eduarda felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The road ahead would have its challenges, raising Esperanza, building their new home, navigating life in a small town where some memories were long. But for the first time, she wasn't facing those challenges alone. She had Augusto by her side. She had Esperanza in her arms. She had friends in Valle Verde who had proven their loyalty. And she had at last a place where she truly belonged. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one, Esperanza asleep in her bassinet beside them, Augusto took Eduarda's hand. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met?" he asked. "When I offered you a place to stay." She thought back to that day, how vulnerable she had felt, how afraid. "I asked why you wanted to help a stranger," he nodded. "And I said what you were carrying wasn't shame, but life." He looked toward the bassinet where their daughter slept. "I was right. She's the most beautiful life I could imagine." "You saw something in me that day that no one else did," Eduarda said softly. "You saw hope when all I could see was despair." "I saw you," he corrected gently. "The real you, behind the fear and the pain. And I've been falling in love with you every day since." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the farm, crickets chirping, a gentle breeze rustling through the corn, the distant lowing of cattle. It was a symphony of peace, of home. "I've been thinking," Augusto said finally, "about Roberto." Eduarda tensed slightly at the mention of her baby's biological father. "What about him? Do you think he'll ever try to find you? To see Esperanza?" She considered the question seriously. "I don't know. When he ended things, he was very clear that he didn't want a child, but people can change. If he did come looking," Augusto asked carefully, "what would you do?" "I'd let him meet his daughter," she said after a moment. "But he gave up any right to be her father when he walked away." You're her father, Augusto, in all the ways that truly matter. He nodded, visibly relieved. I just wanted to be sure we're on the same page. Always, she assured him. From the bassinet came a small squeak, then a louder cry. Esperanza was awake and hungry. I'll get her, Augusto said, rising quickly. Eduarda watched as he gently lifted their daughter, cradling her with practiced ease. He spoke to her softly, words of love and reassurance as he brought her to Eduarda for feeding. As Esperanza nursed, her tiny hand gripping Eduarda's finger, Augusto sat beside them, his arm around Eduarda's shoulders. The three of them together, a family created not by blood but by choice, by love, by the courage to begin again. This is everything I ever wanted, Eduarda whispered, looking up at the man who had changed her life. Everything I never thought I'd have. Augusto kissed her forehead gently. It's just the beginning, he promised. The best is yet to come. And as the night deepened around their little family, Eduarda believed him with all her heart. The journey that had begun in desperation at a rural bus station had led her here, to love, to belonging, to hope, to a future brighter than any she could have imagined. She wasn't alone, she would never be alone again.